I'm going to be giving a lecture about using practice and preparation to improve, but I think my lecture is going to be broader than that. It's more everything you need to know to get better at debate, and I don't want to limit that to just what are the types of speed drills and that kind of stuff that you can do. So it's going to be a very broad-based discussion. To start, I think it's important for me to discuss what it means to be successful, because this lecture is going to sound maybe pretty intense to some people. I was very, very into debate, and I did it a lot, and I practiced a lot, and that is not something that you have to do. And I would have called myself a successful debater, but I would have called a lot of other people a successful debater who didn't practice the same amount, who didn't have the same competitive record as myself. And so the way I define success in debate is the way that you define success in debate for yourself. You don't have to be the top debater in the country to be successful, and you don't have to feel that pressure. But if that is what you want to do, if you want to be the best debater in the country, or close to it and at a very, very high level, the purpose of this lecture is to give you the tools to try to make it there. And so when I say what you need to do to be successful, or if I use the term success throughout the rest of this lecture, know that I've already defined a good definition of success. That is a very limited success, competitive, getting wins and losses. So just know, when I say success during my lecture, I now mean a very narrow scope, but don't think that you have to adhere to that at all. So, the first thing in order to practice, improve, and get good at debate is you need to get inspired. If you want to do the amount of work that is required, get inspired in some way. Either figure out what you like about debate. Maybe it's the thrill of competing against someone who you really admire and trying to take a victory off of them. Or maybe it's trying to match up to the people that you saw your first year or your second year in college, something like that. The way I got inspired is I had a quote from Joey Heiken's favorite quarterback, Russell Wilson, that said, "The separation is in the preparation," and that was a sticky note on my computer every day, and I read that every single day. I also had a picture of Muhammad Ali in my room, some big athletic guy, and I inspired not to be a good boxer, but to be a good debater. So I try to get inspired through other people who are really good at athletics. I also had a quote from Richard Sherman, but that's not as related. Second thing is you need to understand the amount of time and effort that it will take to be successful. This is hard to estimate because a lot of people, when they talk about how much debate work they put in, they will count a lot of frivolous things, or they will just outright lie to you about the amount of work. If you hear someone saying that I did 50 hours of work a week, I don't think so. I don't think someone's doing 50 hours of work. But personally, I did roughly, I would say, 2 to 3 hours of debate work a day, excluding preparation before tournaments, on my own about random things. And that wasn't always efficient work, and we'll be talking about the efficiency of work, but that is where I would roughly say, and I'll give you kind of a rough time break. If you want to be really successful at debate, it's gonna take a lot of time. It's not something that you can just walk on through, because there are gonna be people who are doing 2 to 3 hours of work, and if you're doing one, then you're at a disadvantage. So you need to understand the amount of time and effort. The third thing is that, and it follows from that, is you need to, as I have written here, get your life in order with underlines. And that means a couple of things. First is, and the way I tried to look at school, because I was not particularly interested in school in comparison to debate, is I tried to see doing schoolwork as doing debate work. If I did an hour of my schoolwork, that meant I got to do an hour of debate work later. You don't have to be that into debate. But you need to do your schoolwork in a reasonable time, because the worst times in my life as a debater was my sophomore year, when I was getting super into debate, doing a ton of work, and I hadn't figured out how to manage school, and I had a ridiculous amount of papers, and it was the one semester that I ever bombed school, and I felt terrible about it for the rest of my scholastic life. I switched advisors, I had switched majors because of how bad I did that semester, and I eventually recovered by putting a ton of effort into school, but still not enough that I should have. But you should get your schoolwork in order, and that means a couple things. You should understand how much time, if you really want to be competitively successful in debate, how much time it's going to take, and what kind of school load you can do. I know people who did 5 classes. At Whitman, there's 4, you take 4 classes a semester. I think that's pretty standard. And I knew a lot of people who course overloaded in debate. That is, I don't understand that as a debater if you want to be super, super competitively successful, because otherwise you'll have no life external to school and debate. I would not suggest course overloading. I would suggest taking some easy classes some semester from a professor who's going to give you a good grade, and you know that that is the case. That's some piece of advice that no one tells you in college, but you should probably pad your GPA a little bit with some easy classes. You should take classes off, maybe your second semester, because that's when nationals is, and that's when you're going to be doing the most amount of work, and you don't want to have a terrible time at the end of the year. So maybe take some classes off and get your school in work. But this is also get your life in order. That means be healthy. You don't have to have mandatory workouts like Derek Busher wants to implement at UPS apparently, but you should probably get some sleep occasionally. You should probably, have a roughly healthy lifestyle, because a lot of people in debate crash and burn. Maybe it's not crashing and burning during their debate career, but they get out and they crash and burn. So try to get your life in order, get things situated, get your relationships in order. Also not something that I did. And everything in debate will be infinitely easier if you've done that. So, 4th thing, finally, discussion of practice. There's going to be a lot of that. There are a couple of types of practice. Once you've gotten your life in order, you've gotten inspired, you understand how much time and effort it takes to be successful. The first type of practice is speed drills. These are pretty basic, but I think that they are the foundation of any good debater's work. I think, I would say the number one thing that was most important for me is my speed drills. There are a couple types of speed drills that I like to do. First type of speed drill that I like to do is reading a file fast forward, as fast as you can. It's pretty basic. Second type of speed drill that I like to do is a clarity drill where and one thing I'll say is every time I did speed drills is I tried to pronounce things as clear as possible. There is not much use in my mind of learning to go fast but not learning how to do it clear. So for a long time, the words per minute in my speed drills were like 230 and 240, and I know really good debaters are debating at 300 words per minute, but I didn't force myself to go faster because I wanted to learn the right way. So when you're doing your speed drill, when you're doing fast forward, you should make sure that you're saying every single word, you're saying it clearly. Otherwise, you will teach yourself really bad habits that judges will be very annoyed by in the back of the room. Second type of speed drill is going backwards. This, I think, is a really important speed drill. It really forces you to work on clarity. You have to say the whole word. You end up doing so because you're so not used to working backwards. And I only did those 2. There are other types of speed drills, but I only did forwards and backwards. And I didn't do anything else. There are a lot of other things. You can do the and drill where you say and in between every word. There's that kind of stuff. I never did that because I think that backwards kind of fills in the holes of what the and or the a drill are trying to get in, of saying every word and focusing on clarity. But those are the kind of things you do. So in terms of time, speed drills, I tried to do 30 to 40 minutes every single day. That didn't obviously happen every single day, and I wouldn't say that I averaged 30, 40 minutes every single day, but I would try to, and if I missed something, then I would try to make it up as much as I could. Do 45 minutes the next day. What this roughly means for me, I did some policy, and I tried to get to a point where I could give a 9-minute speech in policy. So I started out at 9 minutes in my forward drill. Then I would always do half the time speaking backwards that I would do forward. So I do 9 minutes, and then I would do I would do like 4.5 minutes backwards, 9 minutes forward, 4.5 backwards, and that would be my day. And every single week, just like, I don't know, exercise or something, I tried to increase the amount of time that I would do so that I got better at talking faster for longer, so that at the end of my speech, I was not winded in a real debate. So I would get up to like 15 minutes forward, 7.5, 15, 7.5. So that's speed drills. I really do think they are important. I pissed off a lot of people in my dorm my sophomore year because I was doing speed drills, and my RA, resident advisor, was upstairs, and there was a vent that went right to her room, and I was doing it in the closet right beneath that vent, and she came down a lot, and finally I figured out, okay, I should do this in the debate prep room maybe, or the debate gallery. So find a place that's good for you, because you're going to be talking really loud, and people are going to think you're kind of bizarre if they hear you do this. But I think it was certainly the most important thing that I did, and I started my sophomore year, but as soon as you can, do that. The second type of practice is videotaped drills. I don't think a lot of people do this, but I started to do this my junior year summer and did it a lot more my senior year. And this is also like watching yourself on debate rounds, if your debate round gets posted online, or you videotape yourself in a debate, which I think is good. But I think watching yourself on video is a really good thing, because you can have a lot of attention to detail, which I'll talk about later, but you can really criticize yourself in a really good way. You can see all of the weird things that you do with your hands, like I'm kind of doing right now as I've been giving this speech. Initially, my coach, Nigel, had a lot of weird forward and backwards and hand around the thing, and I picked that up because I wanted to model him. So as I'm watching these rounds, I'm like, wow, what the heck am I doing? So I tried to be a little more composed from that. Or a lot of people, when they spread, they talk really high like this, and it's kind of annoying to listen to. You can, go, wow, I'm annoyed at myself just hearing me on video. I'm going to change the place in my voice that I speak, and that kind of thing. And I think videotape drills are really good. The third type of drill are redos. This, along with speed drills, I think is a really foundational thing. Super, super important. And often my speed drills were redos. Just giving, for a long, long time, that's how I did speed drills, was I just gave redos. And then I got policy files that I could read a lot, and then I started doing more traditional speed drills. So redos involve taking a speech, a debate that you lost, that you were super frustrated by, or even that you won, but you really thought you could have put it away much easier, or whatever speech it is. Maybe you just had fun really winning this round and you want to give it again. It doesn't really matter. And giving that speech again. And it's really good for a couple of reasons. The first is, what I found is that as a PMR and an LOR, I started learning certain ways of describing impact calculus and how I would phrase weighing one impact versus another, or how I would describe why it matters that the human race dies or lives for 1,000 years. Because a lot of people say, oh, if we die inevitably, it doesn't matter, time frame is irrelevant because we're going to die. And I had a little speech of like, 1,000 years matters, that kind of thing. And I functionally memorized that kind of discussion from the redos that I did so often. And I learned, and that just made me so much more comfortable and around it when I approached anything that I felt like I'd done it before. So redos I think are really important. If you're the PMR, do a lot of PMR redos. I don't think you need to do PMC redos that much. Do a lot of PMR redos. If you're the MO, do a lot of MO redos. LOC, do a lot of redos on case maybe. Maybe don't read the politics dissent 100 times, but maybe practice answering your case over and over and over again. We'll get to that more. The next type of practice, or the next thing I want to discuss, so I guess point number 5 is blocks. And this is another type of practice that I would label memorization. Not necessarily a speed drill, not a redo, not a videotape drill, but where you memorize a specific set of arguments. I'm trying to make this as lecture as broad for anyone who's here. Memorize a specific set of arguments that you encounter a lot and know will be useful. In the context of the member of government, the MG, That might mean learning how to answer specific criticisms and having your blocks on the K. You know the framework argument to say that criticisms are cheating. You know all of those generic alt-solvency arguments. Or it might mean reading impact defense. That's where I think a lot of value comes from blocks. Someone says that X will cause the collapse of the economy, but you know in your head why the economy will never collapse, because there have been 47 recessions in US history and there hasn't been total economic devastation, or the world has never gone to hell. That's a fact I know because of my blocks that I was memorized. So that's the kind of thing that you might memorize with blocks. I think blocks are very important because again, kind of with redos, you become comfortable, you know, okay, someone read 7 minutes of an affirmative and I only have 2 minutes to answer it because I took a little too much time. Well, I know I have some generic blocks that I can fall onto that'll be pretty good. So the type of blocks that I think are good to memorize and practice a lot are impact defense. That's probably number one and top on my list. Internal link defense, which is similar, but slightly distinct and slightly more specific, I'd say. So learning exactly, third is generic. It's not exactly a block, but it's just answering specific advantages. And so this leads me to another point about blocks is you don't want to be dependent upon the 45 seconds you memorize. You'll see a lot of debaters out there who will read a block and they will read 6 arguments, they will take a minute, and you'll be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not going for this argument, but wow, you have spent a lot of time answering it. Or you'll think, 3 of those are totally don't apply, but the debater in their head is just reading the thing that they've memorized. So with blocks, as you're memorizing them and as you're learning them, the way that I did it is I would learn a minute-long version of whatever I was doing, 7 answers to econ. But I would also learn a 20-second to 25-second version that if I needed to get out in a pinch. And then I would have, you know, a minute 30 of information in my head, and I would just spew out whatever came to mind and then stop once I knew, okay, I can only spend 25 seconds here. So with your blocks, you want to be flexible, is what I'm saying. You don't want to just be able to say these 4 arguments, these are the only arguments you know, and you will say them every single time. And a way to make your blocks flexible in your drills is to apply them to specific situations. So a good example, and econ is just kind of what I thought of for this lecture, so that's why I'm referencing it a lot, is don't just read 4 reasons why the economy will never collapse, but maybe apply that to an advantage that has a specific argument. For instance, throughout my career, I was very frustrated by 2 econ arguments. The first was the double dip recession argument. You'll see this a lot. People will say, but we're weak because of 2008, and if we had a double dip recession, that would be unprecedented, and it would collapse the whole economy. So if we had a shock now, something that hurt the economy really bad, it would collapse. Well, we've had 2 double dip recessions in the past 50 years, and they haven't caused economic collapse either. So that's something I memorized. I can't remember the dates. I used to know the dates. Or the second econ argument that I was very frustrated by throughout my career was, but this specific shock is so large, it's unprecedented throughout history because X sector is going to collapse. The manufacturing sector is a pretty common one. So, okay, I'm going to look up when a sector has collapsed in history. And that's the kind of thing that you can do to make your blocks one step further, is you practice answering a scenario that has frustrated you. Put it in the context of an advantage. Or, for instance, you know a lot of reasons why China will never go to war, but you're not entirely good on the actual, in the debate, when you see the advantage that says we're going to deter China by putting a bunch of military, you don't really know what to say at the link level or the uniqueness level. You just know theoretical reasons why it would be bad for China to go to war, and so self-interest indicates that they would never do so. So try to apply your blocks to specific scenarios. And that's another type of practice. The 7th, I guess, or 6th thing I would say is practice answering specific positions. This was very helpful for me. I would practice not every day, this is whenever I felt like it, answering specific advantages that had frustrated me. And I think a good list, I wish I had written this down, I intended to, but a good list of advantages that you'll run into a lot. As I was in LSE, but also this can be applied to disadvantages, learn how to answer specific disadvantages. A good list of advantages would be a soft power advantage. That's a super frustrating one. For those of you who might not have encountered this before, it's the argument that we should do something altruistic. The United States, excuse me, not we. I don't know why everyone references the US as we. It's kind of bizarre. We, or the United States, should do something altruistic and nice, and then the world will love us, and all these great things will happen. Like, we'll solve conflict somehow, because we helped one country. And that frustrated me a lot, so I practiced how to answer soft power. And I remember around in front of Will Chamberlain 3 years ago, in which I answered with all of these arguments that I just learned my sophomore year. Anyways, no worse. So, practice answering soft power, practice answering the hegemony advantage, for instance. We should build up the US military and that will deter people. Practice answering econ advantages. Practice answering the Israel is really scared and we need to help them advantage. Because they don't have a big military or anything, or power parity over everyone. Answer the, we need to help our allies, they're proliferating, and we need to have a show of strength and commitment to them. Answer the, maybe some sort of EU relations argument, a bunch of things. Answer those kind of advantages and learn how to answer it. Same with disadvantages, learn the politics disadvantage. And try to do it strategically. Like, what kind of things would answer, for some reason, everyone in Congress is going to change their voting patterns and vote against things they otherwise would vote for and like because X happened. That doesn't sound very likely. You can probably think of some reasons why that's not going to happen and memorize them because you'll hit that kind of an argument a lot. Anyways, that's a good way to make practice really effective and to make practice very applicable to specific rounds. So that's kind of a general idea of the things you can do to get better. And I don't know a good split of time. I said 30 to 40 minutes of speed drills a day. I think something around the lines of 20 minutes would be good for memorization and do whatever you want there. Also, one thing I'll say is part of practice is also research. So, and this is why I like having this as word preparation in this lecture because I think it gives me some leeway to talk about other things. In order to write those blocks, you need to do research. And I think one of the most effective things and most efficient ways to do research is research things you're going to talk about, rather than, so this will lead me to, my next point, which is work efficiently. Rather than researching things or just reading the news, a lot of people, where they get that I work 50 hours a week on debate number is, myself, if I added up the things that I would call frivolous, when I walked to and from classes or to and from my dorm to classrooms, I would do econ blocks. I wouldn't count that in the number of hours that I did. I would randomly watch videos on YouTube. Connor Savine really knows about that. I know everyone in the policy community was creepy. I went to a policy tournament and I knew every single person there. They'd never met me, but I had watched their videos a ridiculous amount of times. And I wouldn't count those in my hours, because they're not particularly productive. Yes, I definitely learned stuff from watching every video on YouTube multiple times, but it's not the most efficient way to research. And so when you're going about practice, try to think always, what is the most effective way for me to be getting better at this very moment? A good example of my inefficiency, personally, is I wrote a 62-page, maybe 63, I might be getting that wrong, 62 or 63-page Israel-Iran file, all of the reasons why the two countries will go to war and will never go to war. And still in the Whitman-Back files, it's not useful at all. Like, yes, it's kind of useful when you want to find the 5 arguments you could actually read, but in order to find those 5 arguments, you have to look through 500. So when you're researching, don't make a 62-page file. And a lot of people will do this for tournaments. They will write like, and I would do this too, 100, for, I don't know, if I said MO extensions, I don't know if that's gonna ring a bell, but for instance, you write a disadvantage, and then you write all of the answers to the answers that people might read, and your MO writes out those answers to the answers in prep. And so someone says to your politics disadvantage, like, John Kerry said he's not supporting the bill, and you're like, ha, I know the exact answer to that. I would write out like 50 of those too, and you can't write out 50 arguments in prep as the MO. Maybe the MO is prepping something else. So try to be efficient. In the context of speed drills and that kind of thing, as you get better, try to do speed drills a little less. By the time I was a senior, I really didn't do speed drills much. I did other things. I did redos a lot. And I did speed drills some to keep up my ability to speak persuasively, but I didn't need to really get better at talking faster, because I've gotten pretty good at talking fast. I need to get better at talking fast persuasively and strategically. So try to think, is this kind of thing getting outdated? Yeah, so work efficiently. I don't really know the best way to capture this, but another thing about like reading the news, for example. A lot of people would say I do 40 hours of work a week because I read the news, and that's debate work. No, you just reading the news is not going to be sufficient. I wrote a whole thing about how to read the news efficiently. And I'm going to get through this quick because this might be too much of a tangent. But if you're reading the news, find good websites. Don't just read everything in New York Times and go, I know exactly what the New York Times has said, kind of. I've read all of the article tags. I'm going to be great for Parley. I'm going to know everything. Surprisingly, Parley is much more limited than you would think. And just reading everything there is to know about the world is not really an efficient way to do things. So screen out the kind of articles that you read on the news. For example, a good website that I like is Vox. Ezra Klein, this blog writer, an econ guy, moved from the Washington Post, created his own website, and it has a bunch of stuff. But a lot of that is not relevant to debate. So when I was a debater, I would not read the fluff articles. I would read the stuff about the banking sector, because we talk about that and we need to know more. So screen out the kind of things that you read. Read articles selectively. And save relevant articles. This is something that I find very important. I had a file, email thread, and it was like debate articles thread or something was the subject title. And every time I found an article that I thought was relevant, I would put it in there, and I'd have a little summary of what it said that I thought was relevant to debate. Really, really short, so that would be quick. And sometimes I wouldn't even read the article, I just put in, I think this article is going to be important. And that was helpful for me in prep, because I know there's still this report, I can't find it, that says how much the government has subsidized alternative energy. It was this beautiful report. And I can't find it ever again, and I didn't put it in my debate articles thread, and it still gives me nightmares. So if you find something that is relevant to you, put it in an article. And that's the kind of thing about efficiency is, and I think reading the news is a good example, because you can, Tom Friedenbach was this Whitman debater, he was really good, but he procrastinated by reading the news. He didn't call that debate work, he didn't call that, that's how he procrastinated, by reading about the world, because it's not the most efficient way to do debate. And I wouldn't say reading about everything in the world is particularly efficient either. So, if you're gonna, for instance, read the news, do it efficiently. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is not, this is a pretty big jump, because I think I've hopefully given a good foundation of the kind of things you can do, is ways to get better as you're doing it. And I think you need to learn how to learn. And that means a couple of things. First, it means that you need to learn how to critique yourself, and I've said, and admit your own mistakes. This is really hard for people in competitive activities. People like to blame their partners for losses a lot. People like to blame the judge. And sometimes it's the judge's fault. They should have gotten it. Why didn't they get it? Ugh! You know, that kind of expression. And it's okay to be annoyed with the judge, because we should, I think, hold judges to a high standard so that they don't just make random decisions, so that they, you know, validate the work that you've put in. But at the same time, if a judge makes a bad decision, think, why did they make that decision? Maybe they were not persuaded by your really techie language, and you need to know that for the future. And recognize, I could have done something differently to that judge to get them to pick up my team and to give me a win. And I do think there are some people who might be totally random, who you'll never be able to pin down, and their decisions just seem to come out of left field every time. You've tried everything, you've slowed down everything. It doesn't matter. Continue to, don't get the attitude that I cannot possibly improve from this loss, that I can't think of a way. So every time I lost, I would try to, and I didn't always do this, but I would write down things that I did wrong in that round, and I would do redos of every single round I lost. I can't, like from sophomore year to junior year on, I can't remember a single round that I lost that I did not do it. And that's one way to learn from your mistakes. I remember I memorized my final round at MPDA my junior year. I memorized my final round at MPTE my junior year, and I did them throughout the summer, and I came back and I still knew these rounds. Because I thought I could have blamed my partner, I could have blamed the judge for knocking me out of the national tournament or whatever, but it's more effective for me to think, I should have done X, Y, and Z in my PMR, because every single the worst thing about being the PMR is you can always win. So if you lose, it is your fault. You could have won. And that's to learn to critique yourself. Within the context of videos, that means thinking about all of the ways that you sound annoying when you speak. And that is one thing that I will say is like, really think about that. There are a lot of people who never are introspective about the pitch that they have their voice. And super high is bad, super low, it might be not efficient in terms of speaking fast. But just like, try to sound like you're talking normally. Normally when people talk, they talk in a relatively pleasant place in their voice. Try to sound like it. So try to, and critique yourself. This also means learning to communicate with your partner. It's part of learning to learn. When I had a partner from my freshman year to my junior year, first year to my junior year, the same partner, and initially we butted heads. And I'm a kind of abrasive personality. You'll get to know that. And I don't know if fought is the right thing, but we definitely had heated discussions. And in rounds, I would interrupt him, and I would say this argument, because I was always the rebuttalist, so I was always thinking what I wanted to go for. But that wasn't efficient, for instance. This is just a specific example that I think is useful. It wasn't efficient for me to say, okay, say these 30 words, and memorize the 30 words that I'm about to tell you, and then say them back. And you have to be like, what's the other half of the argument you want me to say? I have to say it again. Oh, we've taken up 30 seconds for one simple argument that I didn't end up needing. So we created a system. I was not able to tell him arguments to say. I was only able to tell him when he had dropped an argument or needed to answer an argument more. That was it. And so I would just raise my hand. You dropped this argument, I would say the argument, and then he would answer it. And that's how we prevented ourselves from fighting. I didn't have that problem with my next year partner, and things were a little more flexible, but that's the kind of thing that you want to do to communicate with your partner. We had like partner meetings with our director, Jim Hansen at the time, and like, what's wrong? What can we do to make this right? And we learned how to communicate with each other, because you gotta do that. Learn how to critique yourself, communicate with partners. I meant to make this an individual point, learn from rounds, from learning to learn. And this means doing redos of your round. This means thinking introspectively about what I did wrong, and that's part of critiquing yourself too. It also means round reports. The policy team did this, at Women did this a lot. The parley team did not do it as much. But I think it's a really good practice. People would write first what arguments were, I would write it on the policy team, we had to write it on the computer, but in Parley, I would just write it on, fold the flows map and write it there. First, what arguments were read in the round, brief outline, what the PMR or the MO went for, so that you don't have to look through the whole flow to understand what happened in the debate. I had a pretty good memory, so that wasn't necessary for me as much. Second, write what the judge voted for, their RFD, their reason for decision. The affirmative didn't cover the impact and disadvantage enough, and it caused extinction, and the affirmative had a really tiny impact, so I assessed that the risk of extinction outweighs, even if it's minimal because of all of your reasons why it's unlikely that vote switching would happen for the politics or something like that. Write that out. The next thing that we would write is judge comments, individual comments for what we could improve, and a lot of judges will give that in their reasons for decision and their feedback up around, and I would write that down, what they thought I could do better. I would write comments about the judge. This is super useful. We had this idea that eventually we would create a list with all of the comments possible about judges and put it in a Word doc, and so when you had a judge, you could go there and you could have some info about them. That never happened, but that's a good idea. And you learn pretty quickly what certain judges like. I know that Jonathan McCabe does not like nuclear war causes extinction impacts. And it frustrated me, but I knew this, and I had to plan around it. I'm trying to think of a specific, yeah, that's one example is fine. So write down, this guy does not like speed. One time I had a round where after my PMC, the person said, you were going way too fast. And I really didn't pick up much of what you were saying, and I was frustrated, but I could have probably picked up on that from the blank look the person was giving me, looking at visual cues. So I noted in my mind, if I have this guy in the back of the room, I'm not gonna go really fast. That would be a bad idea. And that's the kind of thing you get to learn. Another thing about round reports is I would do individual criticisms of what I thought I could do better. And that I think is really important because the judge is not gonna give you every piece of information. You're gonna think of things on your own, so write them down. And after every tournament, my partner and I, especially my senior year, would make a list of all of the things we thought we could still improve on, and some things stayed throughout the whole season. We could get better at answering T, or something, or we were not particularly good at answering criticisms, or something like that. We struggled with answering the K on the affirmative for a while, and then we got pretty good at it, I thought. And that kind of thing we would talk about after every tournament. And when you have written down after every round what you thought you could have done better or you thought you could improve on, then you start seeing themes. And that's really where the learning starts, is once you've recognized what you need to improve upon. So that's learning from rounds. The next thing is, I should have, this is a bizarre order. It's kind of back to what kind of things you can do, and I meant to talk about this earlier, but kind of drills. The last kind of drill that you can do is specific drills. Specific drills on specific types of arguments. So, for example, that's a terrible title. It doesn't really tell you much. But the examples will help. For example, drills of answering counterplans, or drills of writing counterplans. I remember in my mind a moment when John Henry, who was a senior my sophomore year, really good in finals of NPDA, I don't know why he did this, but he decided to help me out, and we did a drill where he would write a plan, he would write the two advantages, and he would have me write advantage counterplans to them. Advantage counterplans being a counterplan that is designed to solve a specific advantage that they have, not like counterplan do the same thing but do it slightly differently and it doesn't lead to any of our disadvantages. More like they say they will solve soft power, but they also say they will help the U.S. economy. Okay, we're going to do something to solve soft power that has nothing to do with the economy. That's what an advantage counterplan is. And so I did like 10 advantage counterplans, and then there was this round against Concordia, Joe Laughlin, and Oh my God, Will Fryer, there we go. And I wrote 2 advantage counterplans, and they solved both of their advantages, and I was so happy about it, and we won the round. So that's that's one thing you can do. You can do drills where you answer T, and I think these drills were underutilized in my career, but super effective. Because yes, you can get really good at talking fast, and yes, you can have blocks, but a lot of people are still bad at a lot of things, even though they have all of those skills. And there's not like really a block to answering T besides reasonability. That's like the only thing you'll memorize. So practice thinking of we meets to T. Practice thinking of generating counter interpretations and offense from those counter interpretations. Practice, answering just the K, and a drill for 2 hours where you just do MGs and PMRs on the K, and you have your coach read a criticism in the LOC, MG answers it, goes for the MO for 5 minutes, the PMR answers it. And you ignore case or whatever. And that's, I think, a really effective way to improve. And that's kind of the working efficiently mode of thinking. Because you can do a lot of work, but if you do it pointedly, I think it'll be a lot more effective. Let's see. Oh, yeah. The next thing you should do is you should work over the summer. Yes. Kyle Hendricks, you work over the summer. Everyone should work over the summer. I'm not trying to be mean to the same. One of the most inspiring things that I felt like, and this is part of get inspired too, I like go back to things, was when Mac Gander told me before he had decided he was going to come to Whitman, or that was even a possibility. My junior year, he said, the work I did my senior year during the summer with Hank Fields, he won 3 national titles. It's 3, right?
No, 2.
It was only 2. Wow.
Yeah, scrub.
Only 2. So he won 2 national titles and was in a finals. Third finals.
Oh, I think a 4th time too.
Okay. So he's really good at debate. You should take his advice. He said that work that I did with Hank Fields, my partner, my senior and my summer year, was the most important work I ever did. And the thing about both summer but also breaks is it's a free time to improve. You don't have to worry about school. Maybe you have to write something over a break, but you don't really have to worry about school. You can still do debate work and hang out with friends if you do it, debate work at 11 a.m. or maybe 1 a.m. is probably when you're waking up. And then you can go hang out with friends. But it's free work, and it's not work that people do, really ever. There are very, very few people who seem to work over the summer from my discussions with people. And it's, for the summer in particular, super important because you can really regress if you don't work do debate for 3 months. You can get worse, and you'll notice this with teams at your first tournament. Like, even if you do drills, you won't be as good as you might improve, but at least you'll stay the same. But you'll be rusty because you haven't done drill. But you'll see teams that seem to have gotten worse over the summer, and it takes them 3 tournaments, and then they're back in the swing of things. But that's 3 tournaments gone, and by that time you've gotten better because you didn't go back. You stayed the same, and then you got better through those 3 tournaments. So work over the summer. And for me, that meant every day I did a practice drill, and I would use a video. I'd answer case in the LOC, and then I'd watch myself do it and think, did I actually cover that position? Because it's, you don't know if you actually covered a position unless you're watching. That meant I would watch a video. This is another thing I meant to talk about. Watch a video. There are so many videos online now. On my first year, there were not a lot of debate videos online, high quality rounds online. But there are a ridiculous amount of high quality rounds now. Fortunately, because of the 2013 MPTE, where I think it was the University of Reno, Nevada, recorded like every round in out rounds. It's awesome and they're really high quality, and everyone looks beautiful, so you should watch it. That's just a bonus. And so I would watch a round and I would do one speech. I wouldn't try to do two necessarily. I might go back and do the other one, but I would do the PMR. So I'd watch through the whole debate, and that was both a flow drill, which I also meant to talk about, and I'll talk about right after this, remind me if I forget. It would be a flow drill, but it'd also be a practice drill. And by the time I got to camp, I felt like I was at least the same place, maybe I had gotten better. Working on your generics in the summer this is a really good time to do research on generics, because you don't have to worry about researching because even if, during the year, you might be between tournaments, but you still should probably be updating stuff about what's happening, right? Like, you should still be updating your file about Israel and Iran, because they just had nuclear negotiations, for example, and you need to know what's happening, so you have to write that down. But during the summer, who cares what's happening in the world? You don't have to debate. So work on your generics and research and write down all of your answers to the econ position. So that's, I think, a really good time to work on your generics and try to create blocks. Maybe read a book and write a criticism. I know a lot of people have done that, not me. But a lot of people. Keep your blocks and memorization fresh. So that's kind of a general rule, but you know, I haven't done that econ block in a long time. Okay, I'm gonna do it now. And and you should be understanding what's happening in the world. You should be reading the news, because that's just important as a citizen of the United States, and your civic duty. But, you know, stay up on the world, but you don't have to write everything down. You don't have to post the link to that thread, because it's not gonna be as important, so that's why you get to work on your drafts. And if you work on your over the summer, you will be really good at debating. Like, because you're doing something that other people are not doing. And that's how you get better, is working harder than the guy or girl or other next to you. That's how you get better. So, work over the summer. The other thing, flow drills. I'm reminding myself. That's pretty basic, but I think important and underutilized is really try to practice your flow. And I didn't figure out a good system for myself. We'll have a lecture on this, so I won't cover, I think, probably. So I won't cover too much, but my favorite flow drill was just watching around. I think that's the best. I think it's the most real world. But when you don't have the pressure, and this can happen during tournaments. I always watched out rounds as a younger debater, always. Like, once I got better, and the nerves, you know, you just feel like, oh, I'm too shot and I'm out of this tournament, and I, for my mental health, need to not watch a round. That would happen. But as a younger debater, I always watched rounds, and that was a great way to flow. It was a great way to learn to see the fast talking. The first out round I ever watched, I was totally, I had no idea what was happening. Oh my gosh, it was horrifying. But by don't remember where it was. Yeah, maybe it was at Westburn. I watched Zach Cheetah and Nigel Ramos and Tom Friedenbach all debate each other, and I could understand what was happening because I had watched every single out round till the end of the tournament. And I was always the person who went on the last bus, because oftentimes your one bus leaves, the other people are either in the tournament or kind of want to stay, and I was always that person. So if you want to get better, try to always be that person. Watch rounds, because they'll be great ways to flow. But yeah, I don't want to go too much into that, because I do think that other people are going to be talking about that. I'll leave this open to questions for 10 minutes. Let me walk through all the things that I wanted to talk about. A random last point is have attention to detail. I'm obsessed, and I think it's good to be obsessed in the context of debate and critiquing yourself. So don't be afraid to critique the way you speak and the pitch and the tone in which you say things and how loud it is. I was way too loud as a debater for pretty much always, but I got better. By my senior year, I was a little less yelling, maybe not. So pay attention to every single possible thing that you could do right or you could do wrong. There was this weird thing my sophomore year where I was kind of like stuttering as I talked. I don't know, it was like, not stuttering, but quakiness as I was speaking. I wasn't stuttering, I wasn't stumbling over my words, but there was this quakiness. And I watched around at myself, and that was bizarre. I don't know how I solved it, but I tried to not do it and I didn't do it. So attention to detail is good, and and at the end of the day, if you do not win a national title, it's okay. If you are not the best debater in the country, that's okay. There will only be one best debater in the country, so it's pretty darn hard to be the best debater in the country. There will only be one team that wins a national title, maybe two, if we're not talking about the APTE. So every team ends their career on a loss. I've said that to a lot of people because my dad said that to me, because he said it to his team in his prep room in 1979. That's a long time ago. So it's okay to fail, but if you want to succeed, practice, work every day, have attention to detail, learn how to criticize yourself, learn how to talk to your partner, be focused in your work, work efficiently, and all of the things that I said. So questions? Now I understand what it's like to be a college professor. Well, if we don't have questions, then we're ending 5 minutes early. I hope that's okay.